Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video looking at culture and identity, focusing on types of culture. When examining culture, there are a range of different forms of culture that need to be explored. Subcultures, those with differing norms and values from mainstream culture. Mass culture, the way of life of the majority of the population. Folk culture, the customs and practices of different regions and groups. High culture, the cultural artifacts, tastes and attributes seen as being of higher value in society. And low culture, the culture of those perceived to have less cultural knowledge than others. Finally, global culture, the process of cultural homogeneity that accompanied the spread of globalization from the late 20th century onwards. In this video, we're going to examine each of these forms of culture. Firstly, subcultures. These are groups that adopt norms and values that differ from those of mainstream society, either as a reaction to being marginalised or as independent from mainstream culture. Many subcultures are seen to form around younger people in society, and often around music and other forms of entertainment. Goths, punks, ravers, emos and mods all formed around music and fashion and centred on young people, with many who subscribe to the subcultural way of life continuing that way of life into middle age, seeing the subculture as being part of their identity. But these are not the only forms of subcultures. Social class subcultures can develop their own norms and values, as have LGBTQ subcultures over time. Subcultures can be gendered or based upon ethnic background. Furthermore, professional subcultures, those based on a specific occupation, can also develop independent of mainstream culture. Mass culture is a term used to refer to the norms, values, tastes and attributes of the majority of society. From a functionalist viewpoint, this form of culture is most likely to represent the value consensus of society, while more critical theorists suggest that it represents the dominant ideology of powerful groups. Mass culture often absorbs elements of other cultures, such as subcultures. For example, while rave music started out as a distinct subculture, it was quickly consumed by mass culture in the latter part of the 20th century, despite its initial status as a moral panic. Mass culture represents the everyday life of individuals, what they eat, how they speak, how they are entertained, and what their values are. Postmodernists are critical of the ideas of such a homogeneous group, arguing that individuals choose elements of mass culture to subscribe to, and rarely is there a consensus among individuals. Folk culture is often seen as a relic from a bygone past, with folk cultures representing pre-industrial society through their traditions, practices, celebrations, and largely localised stories and music. Examples of folk cultures include Morris dancing, Irish dancing and the Highland Games, all of which retain a sense of importance to some people, providing an insight into the traditions and history of how groups lived. However, Simmel argues that the impact of folk cultures has diminished in society, and that this is being replaced with mass-produced culture that lacks the authenticity of folk culture. High culture is what many laypersons assume is what is meant by culture. High culture often reflects the tastes of the elites in society and can be seen to be exclusive and prohibitive to the average person. Opera, ballet, classical music and the literary canon are all seen as examples of high culture. High culture is viewed as being part of a nation's heritage, their contribution towards the arts and music, something that is timeless. However, with the impacts of technological advancement and globalization, high culture is less exclusive than it used to be, with people able to access high culture through the internet and being able to travel and see the heritage of different nations. Low culture, on the other hand, is often derided as being of lower value, usually reflecting the cultures of those in the lowest social and economic strata of society. Low culture reflects the habits of these groups, the customs, practices, forms of entertainment, language and food. Often seen as derivative or simplified, low culture is often viewed negatively by those higher in society, what we call a cultural elitist view. and this fails to reflect upon the day-to-day activities of those in the working classes. It is viewed as popular culture, lacking intellectual challenge or any form of sophistication. The growth of new media has meant that there is a need for quantity over quality of content, and this has led to critics often seeing new media as a form of low culture. Streaming services, YouTube videos, reality TV and influencers being seen as low culture. However, elements of low culture are often subject to gentrification, a process of making low culture into middle class culture, such as food, clothing and music being seen as authentic, and that authenticity giving it social approval amongst the middle classes. Finally, global culture. Globalization has led to the growth of cultural homogeneity, with the cultures of other parts of the world becoming absorbed into mainstream culture. Fashion, food, music and sports are all heavily influenced by international cultures, often merging to create hybrid cultures that then become part of a wider global culture. While critics argue that global culture is largely based upon Western ideas of consumption, others will disagree. Fusion cooking, merging cuisines from different countries, the emergence of K-pop, merging Eastern and Western music, hybrid identities such as British Asians, and the multitude of nations playing sports such as football demonstrate the greater interconnectedness of contemporary society within a global culture. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on culture and identity, looking at types of culture. Thanks for watching.